Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce a new speaker. And the new speaker is Jim Belfiore, who comes to us from United States of America. And well, Jim here, by my special invitation, I took that responsibility, and I'm really honored to invite Jim here because I believe his topic he's going to talk about is absolutely crazily important for the entire TRIZ community. You know, we've been there out in the world for 30 years. I mean, outside of the former ex-USSR. And I must say, and everybody sees clearly, that TRIZ has not been there as broadly as we would expect. And I think now we have the opportunity to improve the situation. So Jim's talk is about ISO standards for innovation and their impacts to the TRIZ community. Jim, the floor is yours.
Thank you. No pressure with that introduction. First of all, I'm very, very grateful to you and to TRIZ for the opportunity to speak with you all today. Let me just share my screen to get started. I apologize, I have a particularly wide screen, so this may
that's not a problem.
No, I'll just go into presentation mode. Hopefully this is okay. So
yeah, perfect.
So it's just a very brief background. I consider myself to be a fan of TRIZ. I was introduced to it back in 2002 when I joined a company. I'm sure some of, slides are already moving. How's that happening? There we go, stop that. I started back in, with TRIZ in 2000, the slides are now moving on their own. So, well, this is gonna be fun. Briefly with a company called Invention Machine, which I know some of you, I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to just do this a simpler way. Let's just, when in doubt, we'll just get out of presentation mode. I'll just go through the slides this way. So, and joining that small company, I was introduced to the TRIZ methods, and I found over the years, and not just working with the platforms there, some of you I'm sure have worked with or in the past, whether it was a Tech Optimizer or Goldfire, and then moving on, forming my own firm, and today, not only am I leading a small innovation consulting firm, Sensornis, but I'm also the Senior Vice President of Innovation at Clarivate. I have come to really almost adore TRIZ for its elegance as a methodology, as a way of not just helping to solve problems. I don't just look at TRIZ as a problem solving methodology, but more importantly, as a problem statement methodology. The most important step in innovation, frankly, is asking the right questions, because only then can you actually create the environment for delivering value that the TRIZ methods can are just so good at helping practitioners deliver. But as Valerie, as you've said, one of the challenges in adopting, or I should say in the TRIZ community and as a methodology, is that it's a very niche methodology. It's known by a small group of practitioners, and its adoption is not widespread. And there have certainly been a lot of questions around why is that, why is the case. But I would say that in my own observations, that the demand for value is not a niche demand. The need for delivering value is huge. And in the last couple of years, there's been an emerging trend, not just a trend, but an emerging set of standards that as I started to dive through them and look through them, realized that there's a significant opportunity for any innovation methodology, but in particular, in my opinion, the TRIZ methods, to be able to look at these standards and say, this is a new channel. This is a vehicle through which TRIZ methods can really shine and apply and deliver value. And again, I'm grateful for the opportunity to talk about this and through a paper that I wrote unpublished last year, which again, I'm grateful to TRIZ to be able to present and make available. I'm going to cover in this presentation just some topics from that paper. I'm going to talk a bit about the ISO organization, their background, and specifically a family of standards, some of which have already been published, others that are still in their validation processes, called the ISO 56000 family. And I'm going to talk briefly about implications that I see to benefit the adoption of TRIZ, and leave you with some recommendations. Again, just very briefly, my background, I am a level 1. I am not by any stretch of the imagination a TRIZ expert to the degree that many people in this conference are, but I see a very, very strong connection between the goals of the ISO standards and the goals that TRIZ achieves. So I'm going to talk first from the abstract of my paper about some of the first publications of ISO guidance standards on innovation management, and some questions that align to adoption, as well as other management system standards, a family of ISO standards, and the opportunity it presents for TRIZ practitioners. There's been a set of standards, again, they're in the ISO 56000 family, and this is an ongoing set of publications. The first started in 2019, although their drafting and discussion, certainly it was a 7-year process before the first set of standards went through their final validation and release in 2019 and 2020. The purpose of the ISO 56000 family is to offer guidance to product and process organizations for defining, adopting, and operating innovation management systems. It establishes a common language for innovation practices. There are multiple standards in this family, as I've said, some of which are already published and validated, others are still ongoing, going through their committees and expected to come out. Some, there's 1 or 2 that are slated to come out either at the end of this year or early next year. Questions are being raised by very large companies, by major governments, as to how these standards should be adopted. My current and past clients, including governments and Fortune 500 firms, have asked the question, what do these standards actually mean? Are these things that we need to consider? Because, as I'm sure many of you are aware and see in your own practices, large manufacturing or product design organizations, they're already invested in other ISO standards, and we'll talk a little bit about that today, whether it's related to quality or security. So an innovation management standards track is of interest to those organizations. This is a unique opportunity for the TRIZ community. It provides, the standard family provides a focused insight and guidance related to very specific sets of these standards, including, and previous standards as well, including the ISO 9001 standard, the ISO 14001 standard, and the ISO 27001 standard. And of those 3, the ISO 9001, the watershed standard, if you will, for quality management, there's significant linkage between that standard and the ISO 56000 family. In my opinion, this family could spark a renaissance in the awareness, enablement, and adoption of innovation methods, and certainly for the TRIZ methodology across many industries, because of the need to adopt the ISO 56000 standards. So just some brief background on ISO, about its founding and members, its goals, historical focus, and its recent evolution. Originally, ISO, the International Organization for Standardization, was formed in 1947. It was composed at the time of technical and industry leaders representing over 100, and now over 160 countries. ISO's goals are to ensure that products and services are safe, reliable, and not only of good quality, but of the highest possible quality. It's just some brief history and the evolution of ISO. For decades, published standards mostly related to manufacturing and units of measure. In 1987, in the watershed event, there was a first publication of a quality management standard, ISO 9001. And since then, we've seen other watershed standards. In 1996, an environmental management standard, that's ISO 14001. And it's since branched out into many fields, including information security, reference 27001, energy management, corporate integrity, and most recently, even areas of social responsibility. And many of the discussions you see around a concept called ESG are tied into current tracks on social responsibility standards. So ISO's focus has broadened substantially. And so it's easy to see that innovation would some point come into that fold. I want to now focus on the ISO 56000 family itself. I'm going to just give a quick overview of that family, talk a little bit about its roadmap from how I see it. But I encourage all of you to go to ISO.org and some of the other standards management systems, or if you're already invested in standards through an aggregator or publishers, you can find a lot of this information through your own standards vendor. I'm going to talk briefly about two specific standards in the family, ISO 56000, which is around fundamentals and vocabulary of innovation management, and perhaps the most significant standard that I would encourage anybody here to become very familiar with, and that's ISO 56002, a comprehensive guidance document for innovation management. Just to talk about the family. Again, the first set of standards published in this track came out in 2019. There are 8 standards as proposed in the initial track, and there's certainly going to be opportunities, I think, for it to expand beyond these initial 8. The goal is to provide organizations on how to structure and manage their innovation. And I'll say up front and in other parts of this talk, that all of these standards are guidance standards. So they don't have a certification track that's tied to them at present. They are meant to be guidance. That being said, the customers that I've spoken with and the governments that I've worked with, they treat these guidance standards as if there were a certification track because it provides a common set of definitions and a common set of recommended processes or questions that need to be addressed. The ISO 56000 family specifically takes a systems approach to innovation, something which of course should be very familiar to all of us here in the TRIZ community. They're designed to support innovation in organizations of any size, from the small startup that is trying to solve a difficult problem to some of the largest of the Fortune 50 or Fortune 10 companies that have very, very specific processes for innovation, and everything in between. The family of standards drives benefits both within the innovation organization as well as outside of it, and speaks to guidelines and guidance for both internal and external focus. These guidelines establish sustainable innovation cultures as part of their recommendations. And again, they're non-prescriptive, meaning that these are guidance standards. There's not a certification track, but the fact that it exists as a set or a family of standards means that any organization that's looking to this for that guidance is going to be looking at the same thing. So you have a common point of reference to start from. The roadmap itself, and just to take a look at the current 8 and also some of the side documents that are in this family. ISO 56000 is the fundamentals and vocabulary document to really just set the definitions as to what is innovation management. What are all of the different parameters or the different topics that go into the discussion of innovation management. ISO 56002, again, a key document, a key standard that I would recommend people in this community become familiar with, speaks specifically to innovation management systems. What systems and what processes or guidance should you use in managing innovation. 56003 is around tools and methods for innovation partnership. 56004, a fascinating one on innovation assessments. How do you assess the maturity of an innovation or an innovation management system? 56005 are tools and methods for intellectual property management. 56006 are tools and methods for strategic intelligence management. 56007 That's currently working its way out of committee now. It may already be in its final approvals, are on idea management and idea management systems related to innovation management. 56,008 are for tools and methods for innovation operation measurements. And there are some working documents and technical discussions on illustrative examples specifically around ISO 56000 itself and the family. This family, and specifically the ISO 56000 standard itself, establishes a foundation from which the following standards in that family are built. It defines common terminology for innovation management and the parameters that describe it. It enables a consistency in communication about innovation processes and outcomes. It provides a universal vocabulary as well as fundamental concepts and principles of innovation management that are consistent and are applied across any industry. It enables organizations to share and integrate innovation activities in a credible and consistent manner. And perhaps most importantly is, and I'm certainly seeing this in the customers that I've worked with and the organizations that I've talked to, that I'm beginning to see at least where you could be working with an automotive organization or an aerospace firm or a food and beverage firm or a chemicals firm. And if they're all invested in these standards, they're now starting to talk the same language. Before, what I had certainly seen over the years is that everybody had their own view on innovation. They had their own views on how methods applied, or even just, do they call something an innovation? Do they call something an invention? Do they call something an idea? Now they're beginning to sort of talk the same language, and it's a lot easier to start to talk about methods of innovation and how to apply them across different industries. The ISO 56002 standard is a guidance document for innovation management systems. It's based on 8 principles that organizations are seeking to manage innovation and that they must adopt and own. And these 8 principles are: 1, realization of value; 2, the development of future-focused leaders; 3, continually assessing and setting strategic directions; 4, creating, growing, and sustaining an innovation culture; 5, exploiting insights both from inside the organization and from the outside; 6, managing uncertainty; 7, being highly adaptable; and 8, and perhaps most important, implementing a systems-based approach, a systematic approach to innovation management. This is a comprehensive guidance document and guidance standard, and it addresses all phases of innovation management from ideation through validation to commercialization and the creation of intellectual property assets. Many sections of this standard, 56002, offers guidance which aligns to benefits, methods, tools, and practices of numerous innovation methodologies and processes, and in my opinion, aligns extremely well to the adoption of TRIZ methods. I look at the ISO 56002 standard as almost a sales document, if you will, for the TRIZ practitioner that helps them adopt innovation best practices for continuous improvement, both business improvement and business model improvement. This guidance standard I have seen in use and continues to grow by professional innovation societies, Fortune 500 firms, and major governments. In the last year, I've had 4 large conversations, discussions, and engagements, again, between companies and major governments in the Americas, EMEA, and in Asia Pacific. Similar questions and adoption considerations are ongoing for other standards in the family, in particular 56005 for IP management, as well as idea management and strategic intelligence management. So this is something that is not just a short-term interest or something that once the standard is released, it'll be looked at and then it becomes yesterday's news. There's a series of adoptions and discussions that are ongoing, I would say, at least for the next 2 to 5 years related to the 56000 family in its current form. What are the implications for the TRIZ practitioner and for the TRIZ community? I'm going to break this down a little bit, both to 56000 and to 56002. When we look at ISO 56000, I think the TRIZ practitioner has a lot to gain, first of all, by just reviewing the scope and content of this, literally just a dictionary, a definition of the many terms and parameters that are associated with innovation management, to help the TRIZ practitioner be able to communicate more effectively across a growing set of industries that are looking at these standards and asking, do we want to adopt this as part of our own practice? The standard presents fundamental concepts which align to key benefits of TRIZ methods, of TRIZ practices, and use cases. When I read through both 56000 and 56002, in some regards, it took me back to the TRIZ training that I've had and workshops that I participated in over the years. It just didn't have the word TRIZ in it. So I think that if more companies and governments are starting to look at this and say, should we adopt these guidance standards, you've now got some of the work being done for you almost in getting organizations to be more comfortable or more conversant in a common language, in a common set of definitions. I want to call out a couple of sections of these standards just as examples. In section 4.2.5 of ISO 56000, it outlines reasons why an organization would want to adopt practices of innovation. And several of these align, frankly, in my opinion, to the value drivers of TRIZ methods. So section 4.2.5 of ISO 56000 states that we are to ensure that the innovation strategy and objectives are flexible and adaptable to the evolution of promising opportunity areas. The way I interpret that is that aligns very nicely to considering TRIZ patterns of system evolution. The alignment of TRIZ to concepts, value drivers, and innovation management use cases that are described in this, not just in the 56000 standard, but in the entire family, are very, very significant. In my opinion, TRIZ practitioners have a unique opportunity to reintroduce, in some cases, TRIZ to organizations as a part of adopting ISO 56000 family guidance. So as opposed to, hello, we're here to help you adopt TRIZ, the value proposition is, hello, we're here as part of your quest to adopt ISO 56000, which is recommended coming into compliance with other ISO standards. And TRIZ is one of the means by which you can achieve ISO 56000 adoption. When we look at ISO 56002, again, I see a lot of alignment in goals to the capabilities that TRIZ can enable. The methods and tools of TRIZ can align to many, if not all, of those 8 principles that I listed in ISO 56002. Aligning to the benefits and the value proposition of different aspects of TRIZ to different parts of these principles is going to enable you, in my opinion, to more effectively drive adoption of TRIZ within a standard context focused on sustainable value creation and delivery. So here's an example. In ISO 56002, section 4.1.1b, it says the organization should regularly determine areas of opportunity for potential value realization. I see this that TRIZ practitioners, they often lead teams or workshops that are focusing on discovering the most valuable problems to solve as a preamble of helping teams identify and validate concepts. As a part of a regularly scheduled event within an organization to identify areas of value creation, TRIZ offers very strong benefits that helps fulfill this very guideline. So you can use TRIZ to help an organization in their adoption of this part of the standard, which is an extremely important one in the whole collection of the 56002 guidelines. Another example, in section 4.1.2f, it says the organization should regularly scan and analyze the external context, considering issues related to the potential opportunities and threats, also those that might result from disruptions. Well, as we all see, certainly with our own customers or our own application of innovation methods and TRIZ methods, organizations that create products, processes, or other forms of intellectual asset value need to be aware of what's coming and have an ability to project what might be coming independent of documented insights. Well, in TRIZ, we know that we've got the power and value of S-curve analysis, or methods that examine how technologies and solutions might evolve through evolutionary trends. Organizations that adopt ISO 56002 are going to commit themselves and their resources to require this kind of forethought and analysis. So TRIZ practitioners have a particularly strong conversation point within this guideline, and should consider asking organizations, how do they currently track and project future solutions and disruptions to their value streams? Another quick example, I know we're tight on time here. In section 7.6b, the organization should consider creating awareness of, ensure access to, and provide training for available innovation tools and methods. So again, this speaks very, very much not just to the TRIZ community, but even to Oleg's presentation just earlier this morning, or earlier today. Tools and methods can focus on ideation, scenario planning, idea management, design strategies, and other topics related to managing innovation. The form and formats of these tools and methods can include guides, presentations, education, live services. Section 7.6 of this standard is perhaps the easiest point of entry for a TRIZ practitioner to start a conversation with an organization regarding the adoption of TRIZ tools and methods of a broader ISO 56000 adoption strategy. You combine this with other elements of the standard and in the entire family, the TRIZ practitioner can create a tailored and effective roadmap to help organizations achieve ISO 56000 adoption through the adoption of TRIZ methods and tools. So briefly, some recommendations, and then again, happy to take any questions. TRIZ, again, it's been considered a niche discipline for years, and it doesn't have necessarily a dedicated sponsorship, certainly in companies. We've seen over the years, I'm sure, with our own customers or our experiences, there have been companies that have adopted TRIZ practices, have had a sponsored TRIZ organization, but that hasn't necessarily been long-lived. It may go on for years, but then as people move on, as things change, things focus, it perhaps doesn't maintain its funding, or it loses its interest. But ISO standards are a different animal. They tend to transcend project boundaries or necessarily the people that are within it. The awareness by large organizations, by governments of the ISO 56000 family is growing substantially in just the last couple of years, and will continue to grow, in my opinion. It's raising questions by organizations as to how to best adopt these standards. Even though they're guidance standards, they've got the same kind of inquiries that a compliance standard would. I'm recommending that TRIZ practitioners become aware and well-versed in the ISO 56000 family and keep a watchful eye on the continuing development and upcoming releases of the standards in this track. I'd also recommend that TRIZ organizations work with their memberships, so within TRIZ, for example, working with your membership, to develop alignment strategies of TRIZ methods that help organizations adopt ISO 56000 and create materials and services that promote the adoption of ISO 56000 family through leveraging TRIZ tools, methods, and insights. In conclusion, if you align the business value that's proposed by this family with TRIZ, I think the TRIZ community has a unique opportunity over the next few years to reinvigorate and increase significant mind share and adoption of TRIZ methods and tools in the name of driving value through the adoption of innovation management standards. So with that, and again, I apologize for the slight technical issues here. I want to thank you for your time and attention. Larry, again, I really appreciate the opportunity. I know this was something that came together sort of at the last minute, but happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Jim. If you scroll through the chat window, you see that there are already a number of questions to you.
Yeah, yep. Let me stop sharing, and now I can come over here and let's see. So where did we start here? So.
Okay, there is from Rames.
Okay, is that the one in 2010? My PhD I suggested to include. Is that the first one?
No, we scroll up.
Oh my goodness. All right. So let's see.
The text on slides are too
It's
tiny.
too tiny. Can you transfer viewing to full screen?
It's too late.
Yeah. But the slides will be available in my white paper.
Yeah.
Is available through TRIZ. Jim, this is the interest of for about 10 years. Thank you for touching on it. TC 279. Yep, that's hardcore. Standardization of terminology tools. Are you familiar with TRIZ groups or specialists who are involved in this process? So I would say that I know organizations, and I'm happy to talk individually on this, but certainly I have seen both in major governments and companies that they have questions about the standards. In some cases, they've had TRIZ practices in the past or ongoing. So I would say I'm aware of some non-disclosure agreements, obviously, from a client perspective. I just want to be cautious on not naming names, but I would say if you're dealing at the Fortune 500 or certainly the Fortune 100 level, you're probably going to find TRIZ pockets, whether officially or unofficially. And certainly in large governments, particularly in the energy sector or energy concern or resource management, you're going to find them there. Some practice standardization of TRIZ methods in Germany happened. Do you know about it? Unfortunately, not specifically to one country. I apologize for that. It's a little bit different from standardizing the innovation process, of course. And that's the interesting thing. I know on the 56,000 track, and I know some of the folks that are leading, particularly the one who's working on the idea management track right now. This is sort of the interesting thing where experts are coming together from different countries. And so part of the validation process is to make sure that all of the differences that therefore the standard can apply universally or to 160 countries is being addressed. So there's a homogenization that's certainly going on, at least that I've seen. Let's see, there's a standard in German on TRIZ. Okay. Level 1, level 3. This brought TRIZ to be included for the OS standard for the automotive development. I can help if you want. What I would suggest, for anyone who wants to help on this, I don't represent ISO. In fact, I'm representing today just my own independent innovation firm, even though I am also involved with other companies as well. I would say that your best bet is to contact your standards body in your country. So for example, there's one standards body working in the Americas, there's another working in different countries in Europe, and they feed into the ISO organization. There's also a number of forums that you can find this information out at ISO.org. Let's see, in 2010, my PhD, I suggested to include the usage of systematic innovation methods, i.e. TRIZ, in the ISO standards of innovation management process. Up now, no movement in this direction. So, since these are guidance standards, I'm just going to offer opinion here. Again, I'm not representative of ISO. As guidance standards, it allows them to take, certainly in my opinion, a sort of methodology neutral or tools neutral approach. These are the guidelines for which any innovation method or tool would apply. My message today here is that when I read through these, I think TRIZ has a very strong alignment. And so, think of it, I hate to put it in this context, but think of it almost as a Trojan horse in some regard, right? You've got the standards family, but how do you actually then achieve the goals that the standards are recommending? I think the TRIZ community has an opportunity to provide some of the internal workings necessary to help achieve those goals. Without TRIZ methods, the standards family looks empty and used. Well, again, these are guidance standards. I agree, they read as guidance. They don't specifically say, take this tool and do this, or take this process and do that. They determine they recommend the outcomes and set terms and definitions for how organizations should describe this. I would look at this from the organization or the customer, if you will, perspective. They may not know what tools and methods exist to begin with, but they do know that there are standards that they are adopting and that they're buying to try to, just as they're depending on, for example, ISO 9001. And in their updates, they'll have feeders to standards that tie into it, including 27,001, 14,001, and now the 56,000 family. So I would say this is the opportunity for the TRIZ community to step up and say, if you're looking at this, we have the tools and methods that help you achieve these goals. The current version of the standards, just organization and monitoring certification purposes, not real innovative engineering. Again, these are guidance standards. It's not something that has a compliance aspect to it. And so I would agree, these are general in terms of what they are recommending in terms of outcomes. But it's the opportunity for tools and method organizations such as this one to step up and say, we can help you, the organization that wants to adopt this set of guidelines, actually make it real, turn it from just a guides to something very, very concrete.
Maybe I just use one word, because
Sure.
currently there is also the standard 56008, which is under development,
Yeah.
and which focuses on operational stuff, which is not just on the organization monitoring, etc., but how the innovation operations are done. Just insert.
Great, thank you, thank you.
Jim, maybe 1 minute more, and we need
thank
to
you.
close
I
it out.
apologize, I'm running late here. In the early mid-90s, VP of Engineering, mid-sized manufacturing company, I was involved in the adaptation of ISO 9000 family standards. So obviously people who wrote the standards know very little about manufacturing business. Looks like nothing's changed the past 30 years. Again, I'm looking at this as just something I've observed.
That's more statement.
Well, no, but it's a fair point. And I can say, for example, I know a number of people who've been involved in some of the ISO standards, including there's actually one person in particular on the idea management track who is actually a member of my team in a past firm. And so I would say that some of the sharpest minds that have actually come through, the education and the inspiration that TRIZ and others have formed are actually involved in the development of these standards. Does that mean it's going to read like something that comes from TRIZ? No. But at the same time, I think there's very much an awareness that there's a lot of discussion that's been happening around innovation management for years. And it needs to have a common framework, a common set of language. And so that's the opportunity to say that, all right, if a large number of companies and governments are at least looking at this and saying, what do I need to focus on? You've got their attention, right? And you have a limited window to be able to say, we can help you achieve these goals if you're going to use this standard to get there.
Right. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
We're already off. So thank you very much, Jim. I know that this is a real discussion because some people believe that all the standards are primarily bureaucratic, etc. You need to have them to sell. Some believe, especially here in Europe, that they really can rise your organization up on a quality innovation level. But the time will tell, I think. Thank you very much, Jim. I believe this is a very useful topic. So, ladies and gentlemen,